All right, so this is a recorded session instead of putting this into the lecture because I think it is optional and I don't want to basically waste the time of everyone to talk about this, but I think it is important to me. So I am recording this so for people who think this is also important to get watch it. So I'm scrolling all the way to the bottom of all the topics in CISP310. And I know it sounds really kind of skeptical of it's computer science for you. Um, but I think it's not a, how should I put it? I don't think it's a bad thing to evaluate, because I have had cases, not too many, but I have had cases where a student took this test and eventually changed major, um, and actually came back to thank me for having this assessment accessible, because after the student that those particular students changed their major, they were much happier with their new major. Now, does it have to do with they don't have to take classes from me again, or is it because the other major is actually a better choice? That I cannot differentiate and tell you. So there's always that possibility that just being able to take classes, or not having to take classes from me ever again is making life better already for those people. So that's entirely possible. I'm not saying that that is not a possible theory. But I do want to kind of share with you, what is MBTI, which is Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It is a way to assess personality. So I'm just going to click on this link over here. And this is one of the many websites. I got a few other links now. I probably should put it into these modules as well. Is it's a survey, okay? So I can just click on take the test. You don't have to sign in. You don't have to pay. You don't have to even give them your email address. You can just go ahead and click, take the test. And what the personality test is it's okay. About the test first. So the test is pretty quick, depending on how much time you spend on each question. It can take, I would say, somewhere between 12 to 20 minutes. Some people take a little bit longer. The second one is you kind of have to be honest with you to answer the questions as to reflect your preference instead of what you think is what you want to be. Okay, so there's a difference between, this is what I would like to be, this is how I would like to act, or this is how I would like my preferences to be. But, just answer the test, based on what you prefer. Just be honest, because nobody is taking note. I mean, you're not signing in. No one can associate your answer with you. Okay, so the questions are kind of interesting. Like this one, you enjoy vibrant social events with lots of people. And you can see that you have a range of answers that you can give. You kind of think about this and kind of place yourself in a vibrant social event, and you think, are you going to enjoy it, okay, with lots of people? And sometimes it's kind of vague and not clear. Is it with a lot of people that you know, or with a lot of people that you do not know? So in those situations, I would just say that assume that those are the people that you may not know. Okay, so these are social events with lots of people, and many of those people you do not know. So to me, it's definitely strongly disagree. Okay, I do not enjoy such occasions. You often spend time exploring unrealistic yet intriguing ideas. Okay, so you think about this and go like, well, do I spend, an unusual amount of time opening like tens of tabs, on your browser just because you were just freely, you're just free roaming Wikipedia, and one link leads to another one, and then leads to another one, and then before you know it, it is 2 a.m. and you have 40 tabs open on your browser. Okay, if you're one of those people, you click totally agree. Okay, so this is kind of how you want to answer these questions, and there are, I cannot remember, I think like 50 questions or something like that. So after you answer all of these questions, the test will give you a result. Okay, it will tell you what personality you belong to. So there are 16 of these because there are 4 letters. Each letter is indicating one particular, I would say, axis of your personality. So you got the analyst type of personality, you got the diplomats personalities, the sentinels, and also the explorers. And then within each group, you have 4 subtypes. So within the explorers, you have the virtuoso, adventurer, entrepreneur, and entertainer subtypes. And then if you click on each one, it will give you a kind of interesting insight. So let's take a look at a very common personality type. The frequency distribution of personality type is not even. In other words, it's not like in the population 1/16th or even approximately 1/16 is logistician and 1/16th is defender. These 2 types, interestingly, are the majority. Okay, they are way overrepresented in population. So let's click on this one. Okay, I'm just using it as an example. So you can see that it has an introduction. It talks about just an overview of this type of personality, and it has sublinks to each aspect of this type of personality. So for classes, I think it is important to look at strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so they tell you that this particular type of personality, they tend to be honest and direct, strong-willed and dutiful, very responsible, calm and practical, create and enforce order, jack of all trades. Okay, but in terms of room for improvement or things that sometimes can be seen as the flip side of their personality, would be these people tend to be stubborn, insensitive, always by the book, which kind of goes back to stubborn and not being flexible, judgmental, and often unreasonably blame themselves. Okay, so they put a lot of burden on themselves. So this is kind of important because it's an overarch that can determine many aspects of your life. But from my perspective, this will determine how you study. This will determine how you learn, and and it might give you some insight of things that you can do to succeed in a class. So I'm gonna skip romantic relationship, friendship, parenthood, but I'll skip all the way to career paths. Okay. Now with this one, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt because if computer science is not on your career path, it doesn't mean automatically that you cannot study computer science, that you cannot succeed as a computer scientist or computer engineer or software engineer or anything like that. Okay. It simply means that you might have other paths that are more suitable. Okay, that's all that it's saying. So when you I kind of explained it too, why things are on your career path. So in this case, for ISTJs, they have no other view than to promote the public good. Okay, so that's kind of good, right? Business discourse should be short and comprehensive. And I was hoping that it would actually give you a list. So I think they took that away because people felt that it's too restrictive. Workplace habits is kind of important too because I can observe. Okay, different people have different ways of interacting on Discord. So logisticians have certain types of workplace habits, and it breaks down to what happens when they work for someone, and what happens when they are working with someone, and also what happens when they become managers, when they're in charge. Okay, so in the setting like a class, it is probably important to understand this aspect is how you interact, or how your preferences influence how you interact with your peers. Okay, so colleagues are your peers or your other students in the class. I am really not your boss. Okay, I am not your boss and you're not my subordinate. Okay, so this may not apply entirely to that part. And there's always a conclusion, which is kind of important as well. So you might want to take this test. There are a few other tests. Um, I have those kind of recorded on my phone. So let me go look for those and share with you as well. Okay. All right. So one is keys to cognition. Okay, there we go. So let me search for that. Keys to cognition. There we go. This one is older, and it looks kind of unprofessional. But the interesting thing is, if you watch the look for the, this one is actually done by UCLA. A particular person, who probably at the time or even now is over at UCLA. And this name, Nardi, is actually kind of interesting. This person did a few other research, basically correlating brain activity with personality types. So that's kind of interesting because there's quote unquote science to prove that personality types is not really just something that exists out of physical characteristics. It's actually there are brain activities correlating with each personality type. So it's kind of interesting. There's even a book written by the same person. So once again, here's a test. The questions are slightly different from the other ones. So if you take one test and you go like, I'm not so sure about this one, take another one. Okay, take this test also and see what the conclusion is. I am very consistent when I took multiple tests. They all conclude of they all concluded I'm of the same type. So that's kind of useful. So I'm gonna close this tab and also close this tab over here. Another way for you to assess your personality type is to follow this link. This one is really interesting because you're not taking a test. Okay, so with this one, it's really kind of cool because they did it on certain celebrities already, like Oprah. So in the case of Oprah, if you click on it and say analyze, basically this is IBM's Watson AI to go through all the tweets and replies from Oprah and analyze her personality. This one is a lot more details. There are more axes involved, and then within each axis, there are more sub attributes as well. So that's kind of interesting. Obama used to be on here, but I don't see him here anymore. So they probably took it off for some reason or another. Um, Now, if you have written a lot of stuff, like in your English class or personal communication and whatnot, you can click on a body of text. Oh, here we go. This is from the 2012 debate from Barack Obama, and it will analyze the text and figure out the personality of Barack Obama. But you can use your own. So if you write anything in Reddit, or if you write anything, if you have a lot of tweets, if especially if Twitter can give you a big huge summary of all the text that you have written on Twitter or some other social media channels, you can plug that in here, okay, and click analyze so that Watson, the AI, can assess your personality based on what you turn in. In other words, it can be very incomplete because if you are putting in everything that you wrote for your English class, it might say that you're very say analytical and so on, because you have been only writing analytical papers. So what you submit does definitely influence the conclusion from this engine here. The personality type reported by Watson is called Ocean, OCEAN, which is a 5-axis instead of 4-axis type of assessment. They are somewhat interchangeable. They can give you the same kind of insight, but at the same time, they're also different. So I would definitely encourage you guys, in addition to MBTI, go ahead and play with this one as well. All right. And of course, take everything with a grain of salt. Um, so let me open this link. This is something that I wrote, and because it is, there we go. Okay, so this is not something that I wrote. Okay, this is actually from Quora, which is a place. It's kind of like Reddit, but for older people. So with this one, people post questions, and there are specific people asking questions about what MBTI types are computer science likely to be. Now, obviously, the person who asked the original question, could not spell, but that's okay because the answer is what counts. Okay, so there are multiple people answering the question, and then there are people commenting on the answers to other questions, and so on. So you probably want to read this, if you want to confirm, your personality type lend itself to computer science, or if it does not, okay, if it is not one of the types in here, then you can probably try to understand, what you need to do to succeed in computer science. Because it's not like that you have to be one of these types in order to succeed in computer science. Um, it is more like, well, if you know your preferences and you know computer science involves what type of activities and what kind of hmm, how to approach problems, then you can kind of work around it. Okay, I shouldn't say work around. You can adjust. Okay, and kind of adjust the way you do things, so that you can succeed in computer science. So having said all of that, okay, having said all of this, um, how do you study computer science, or CISP310 to be exact in this case? Okay, so I want to kind of go through, there are three things. Okay, so let me use a mouse pad here so I can just kind of write it down. Okay, mouse pad, there we go. All right, so there are a few things. So first of all, you want to understand what resources are available to you. So we have the synchronous sessions, okay, which is done via Discord, but it's recorded in YouTube. So that's your first resource that is available. Well, I wouldn't say first, but this is one of the resources. And there are the written modules, okay, on Canvas. Okay, so these are linked on Canvas to my documents. And then you have the labs, okay. So these are the three main resources, um, for you to learn the material in this class. So now the question is, what do I expect you to do, okay, to succeed and learn in this class? The first thing I expect people to do in this class is to read the modules, okay? Um, there's really nothing to replace reading the material. Um, Now, if you can succeed without doing this, hey, more power to you, and it is not a problem. Okay, but for most people, I think it is important to read the modules, especially read it before the synchronous session that talks about that particular topic. So this way, you prime your brain or your mind with some of the concepts already. You may not understand everything, okay, but at least you kind of get an idea of what is being what will be taught, okay, in the live session, in the synchronous session, and also the big pieces. Okay, you can see the big picture, even though the details can be a little bit kind of fuzzy. And that's generally speaking, what the synchronous session is for me to kind of talk about the topics in the modules already. Now the synchronous sessions I think is really important because I specifically make it synchronous, even though this is a quote-unquote online class, because I feel that it is important for people to participate in real time and ask questions when they have questions, not later. Okay, when they have questions, ask questions, and I can then answer those questions interactively. Now, it has several advantages doing it this way. One is it is very timely. Okay, you don't have to wait for a long amount of time before I answer the question. Okay, because after the live session, after I spend basically about 4 hours each day teaching this class, I move on to do other stuff that I need to do, in my life. Okay, I occasionally will pop back into Discord to answer some additional questions, but that's not it's not structured anymore. Okay, but the 4 hours from 9 to about 1 o'clock, that is structured. Okay. If you cannot make it to the live session because you have to work, you're taking another class at the same time, or for whatever reason, okay, you just cannot wake up before 1 p.m. Okay, that's okay. Watch the recorded version. Okay, now when you watch the recorded version, you also want to move on to go to Discord and open up the class notes at the same time, because this way you can kind of track on Discord and kind of look at the questions that I was answering during the live session, because the interaction between students who can make it to the synchronous session and me, that can be important. Okay, so don't just listen to the lecture, because even though I try to repeat the questions as much as I can into the live session, being able to read the text in Discord of what went on during the live session, I think that is beneficial. Okay, so what do we do after the live session? Well, you can move on to the labs. Okay, if you feel that you have successfully understood the concepts, then you can move on to the labs. But I would recommend that most people, when they are doing the labs, also open up the modules on the side, because what the labs are designed to do is another dimension to help you understand the material in the modules. Okay, the concepts that you need to understand in this class. So when you're doing the labs, there's no restriction of, oh, you cannot watch the recorded session on the side, or you cannot open up the written modules in Canvas, on the side. You can do all of that when you're trying to do the labs. But the key of doing the labs is try to be independent. Okay. Um, I cannot, and I do not care, okay, really how people do their labs, okay. In other words, a certain level of collaboration is okay from the grading perspective. However, um, when someone is learning almost entirely from asking questions and having people to answer those questions to provide the information, piece by in very small pieces, okay, to get through the lab, I think that person is not going to learn enough to do well in the exams. Okay, that's just my observation. Okay, from having taught this class for more than 10 years. Okay, that's just my observation. So that means, okay, for people who are doing the labs, they should try to be independent as much as possible. Okay, in other words, um, if we are working on a particular step of the lab, okay, and the instruction says something, and it doesn't seem to be clear how to get it done. Okay, now what do we do when the instruction doesn't seem to be clear of what needs to be done? Well, we have to identify the reason why it is not clear. So is it not clear because the steps themselves are not clear, or is it not clear because the definition of the terms is unknown, or it is not clear? Now, I seldom would make mistakes in the lab instructions to give you wrong information or to miss certain types of information. In other words, they're there, okay? But you have to relate the lab instructions back to the written modules, okay? Because that is the first source people need to go back to, and usually go back to the synchronous sessions, because I usually would have talked about those concepts before the lab is assigned. Okay, so from those two, okay, it takes time, depending on the person and also the personality type. Sometimes it might take a little bit of time to have all those concepts synced in and so on. So why do I want to wait, okay, and do this by myself when I can just ask someone on Discord or some other source to help me? Well, I think there's a difference between figuring out things by yourself versus getting that something from somebody else. Okay, um, if you get it by yourself, okay, DIY, okay, if you do it yourself, that knowledge is going to be incorporated in your mind, in your in your logical framework in your mind, a whole lot more um, concretely compared to the other approach. Okay, in other words, if you figure out something by yourself, okay, you're not going to forget it. Okay, it's going to be there almost forever. Okay, occasionally you might have a hard time recalling it, but it's there. Okay, you just need to index it. Your brain will find it. On the other hand, uh, if you ask people for help, okay, even for very small steps, and do not go through, okay, if you do not go through the process of do it yourself, okay, how should I put this? Um, mm, okay, I'll just say non-DIY, okay. So the non-DIY approach may seem to be kind of efficient, right? Because I don't have to spend the time, to figure out things by myself. And I'm just going to ask other people, maybe the professor, but I'm well known not to spoon feed, not to give people tiny little pieces of information, and and just I tend to answer questions with questions. But there are other people, who are much more willing to, help out and answer those questions. So, what about that, right? Well, I think in those cases, the knowledge and the information and do not gel as well in that person's mind, because that person did not go through the exercise. Now, the exercise seems like a waste of time, but what it does is it reinforces, it makes your logical framework in your mind, stronger, and so that it doesn't only benefit in this class, because the way you spend the time to understand something in this class, that logical process, that analytical process, is reapplicable to your other classes. And most importantly, because all of you are going to graduate in a few years, most importantly, that type of skill is going to be needed when you go to work. Okay? So it is really useful or important to try to do things yourselves, first. And when you're totally stuck, okay, when you're totally stuck, you have used all the resources already, outlined here, and you're still stuck, that would be a good time to ask questions. Okay, and when I say ask questions, it would not be general questions like, I'm not getting this, can you explain it to me? It's more like pinpointing exactly what you're not understanding, and ask for a very specific clarification or explanation. Okay, because in the process of formulating the question, your brain is working too. Your brain is actually being, trying to exercise its analytical and logical skills in order to formulate a question that is as specific as possible. So that is also important, is how you ask questions. Okay, that is also really important. Um, so I think this is getting kind of long already. I'm looking at the stats of this recording is a little bit long, so I think I should probably stop at this point. So the bottom line, okay, if you are still listening and watching, so the bottom line is, use the resources available to do the labs, okay, and try to do it as much as possible by yourself, okay, and try to be independent. And only when you encounter problems that you absolutely cannot solve, using the resources that are available to you, and you have spent some time to try to digest and absorb the material, then you can try to ask other people and try to ask the questions as in a very specific way. This is just my recommendation. Okay, if some people feel that this is bullshit, I don't work this way, I want to do it my way, which is not this way. Hey, I'm not here to stop you. Okay, I'm only here to tell you what works for me, and by extension, I think this is also going to work for most people. But if you disagree, okay, it's fine. This is not really a part of the class. It is not about computer science itself. It is not about assembly language programming. So if somebody wants to disagree and go like, I am not going to do it this way, that's okay. Not my. It is not something that I cannot force this on other people. It would not be right for me to force this on anyone else either. All right, so that's the end of this particular recording, and I'm going to push it now onto the web.